Hey there, you are listening to the In Kinship podcast, and today I am so delighted to share with you my guest, Anne Morningstar. Anne is a full-time professor of art and design at North Central Michigan College. She's a co-owner of Bear Creek Organic Farms and the design mastermind behind the brand, and she considers herself an artist who designs, and we get into that in our conversation, what that means. She has some beautiful thoughts around that. And she views each aspect of her daily life as a creative endeavor. Her mission as a professional creative is to ensure access to art, design, and creative growth for all. That's not just a mission statement. That's not just a bio. That is the truth. Anne and I had such a delightful conversation. We began talking about how she grew up as a maker, what her mama instilled in her at a very young age, and how she brings that into her life today. We talk about what it is to be a business owner. We talk about what it is to be not just a business owner, but a business owner who began a business based in deep personal values, and how you bring those personal values to your customer experience, and how you then sort of match that with the customers that you hope to attract. We talk about how going at life with some intentionality and perspective is so important, even when you're tending the hive. Yeah, the beehive. Because not only is Anne a creative, an artist who designs, and a professor of art, she's also the queen bee over at Bear Creek Organic Farms. We spent a lot of time in this conversation diving into what it means to be a time-based creative, how it pertains to education, experience, branding. I'm guessing after you listen to this podcast, you might just try to figure out a way to enroll in classes at North Central Michigan College, just so you can spend a little more time with Anne. And one of the fun things too, about midway through, she shares an exercise that she does with her art students. I'm excited to give it a shot, and I'd love for you to do it as well and tell me how it goes. All right, without further ado, let's get on to the show. You are listening to the In Kinship podcast, and I am your host, Tina Vandenberg. The In Kinship podcast is a podcast for makers who crave an authentic, vibrant, full of life on their own terms. Before we begin, we have a quick word from our sponsor. Ricky Oldenkamp Marketing is our sponsor for today's episode. And if you've got something to sell, you need to know how to tell others about it in a way that instantly showcases you're an expert worth trusting. You don't need to spend all your time begging to get noticed. Strong messaging can differentiate you and get you instant, easy attention on your business. And you don't need to let a sense of unnecessary modesty or imposter syndrome stop you from connecting with your prospects. Shed the struggle. Ricky Oldenkamp is a copywriting and marketing strategist who helps you get strategic solutions to your biggest marketing challenges. You can read more about Ricky at rickyoldenkamp.com. That's RICKIOLDENKAMP.com. You can also check out a special offer she has just for today's listeners on the show notes at kinshiphandwork.com/episode-10. Let's get started. Today, I have Anne Morningstar with me. Anne, welcome to the show.
Thank you for having me. I'm so excited to be here.
It is always exciting, like the cracking open the brand new podcast episode, right? And cracking open a brand new conversation. It's exciting for me as having the guest here. And I know a little bit about you and a little bit about your history, but I have no idea what you're going to say today. And it's so exciting to imagine what that might be.
Could be anything. You're not ready.
That is true. So, Anne, before we talk about your place in the world right this minute in your life, I'm wondering if you might tell me who inspires you to be a maker and if you identify as a maker and what that looks like.
I absolutely identify as a maker. If I had to trace back to who it was that originally inspired me to begin making, it would definitely be my mom. She, from day one, I think like where I was out of the womb, she was already trying to get me and my sisters to be as creative as we possibly could be. I'm one of 4 girls, And so we lived in a very fairyland sort of situation all through childhood. And my mom was definitely at the core of that. She taught me to sew when I must have been 5 or 6. I learned how to crochet a year after that. She always had lots of different buttons and fabrics and string and just tons of different supplies that she really loved to just have available to any of us. And her getting out her sewing basket was always this moment of like anticipation. What are we getting ready to do? And so the creativity really just started to grow from there. She taught us to cook and to bake from a very young age as well. And so there was actually a point in time, I believe it was 2nd grade, when all of us sort of turned 7 or whenever that age is. And it was our responsibility to make dinner for the whole family. And so that was sort of our initiation, if you will, into this idea that we were now old enough to do the dishes and to be participants in this making process. And so I think that really where it went from there and then the continued inspiration has then come from my sisters. So it started with my mom, has continued with my sisters, because being by their side through those initial phases of creation and creativity is really what drives how I still am able to have that foundation today.
Very nice. So I'm picturing this. I'm definitely imaginative human this way. So like people will tell me some gruesome story and I'm like, stop, I can't hear this. It's like oozing all over me right now. But
yes,
I like to picture, where do you fall in the lineup of your 3 siblings?
I am the 3rd of 4 girls. I was the observer. I was the one who never talked. There was a point during a college visit, I was being recruited for basketball, and I was on a college visit. Both of my parents went with me to meet the coaches. And at the end of that visit, we were getting in the van. And when I shut my door, my mom turned around and looked at me and she said, "Anne, I never knew that you knew how to talk so well." I was 18 at the time and didn't know if to be offended or honored. My mom knew that I knew how to present myself, but I've always been a very quiet person. You meet me today, and that's definitely not the case. I have a lot of things to say. And I think that that's what art school did to me.
So you're 3rd in line, right? Well, we'll just say in line, because I'm picturing you getting all to this age where you get to create and make dinner and plan it, I'm guessing. I also do that with my 7-year-old, although we just began. So right now it's like popcorn. Yes. Because he gets to pick whatever he wants. That's the key to this at our house. I
love that. I love that. Yes.
And he likes to make popcorn on the stove. So we make it on the stove. So anyway, so then I'm wondering, like, as you all become 7, do you pick up that responsibility and hold it for the rest of your childhood? Like, I'm loving the thought that maybe your mom had 4 dinners taken care of at some point. This is where I'm going. I'm like gleeful over here. And I'm just wondering, I love to cook too, but sometimes it gets arduous. So
sometimes it does, especially when you're trying to, hit on those picky eaters or someone who maybe isn't into something. Admittedly, my very first meal that I chose to make was Kraft macaroni and cheese, which my mom then promptly informed me that my dad would really like to have meat along with the meal. So then I had the idea at that time, and I remember this very vividly, that I chose to do ground hamburger and to put the ground hamburger into the mac and cheese and then dip potato chips or corn chips and like eat it that way.
Nice.
And so I remember that so well, and it's actually carried over into today. As far as making the meals, and if we are expected to make the meals for the family at that point in time, it was never that, I don't know that it was ever that strategized by my mom or that specific of a thought that she had. I think that for her, it was more knowing that we had the ability and that we at any point in time could. So I don't know that she was ever looking at it from her point of view. It was a very sort of selfless guidance of, I want you to know how to do this. And there was nothing else attached to it other than this beautiful gift she was trying to give us so that we didn't go through life or grow up not knowing how to do something that she felt, in her mind, all of her children should be able to do.
Yeah. Very nice. Very nice. Okay. All right. Having Ellis cook is not about him taking over a night of cooking. It's for the same reason. But I liked to picture that.
I can see now, as a mother of young children, I can definitely see how there are benefits. And I think we're going to start maybe with the meal planning. Our kids are very active in the kitchen. They have been since birth. I mean, it was a week postpartum with every single one of them. Every Sunday we make blueberry pancakes, and they have all been in the front pack making blueberry pancakes, whether they were asleep or then eventually facing out. And now, sure enough, I have all three of them, one on each side and then one in the middle, every Sunday, even last Sunday, making the blueberry pancakes with me. And they all know how to flip and do all the things, and they're better off for it.
Isn't that amazing? The things that we do that bring us such comfort as adults. So like, you still make macaroni and cheese in that way that you made, because I would guess that in creating that for your family and taking your dad's desires into account and trying to make something that would taste good, like, you created something that is just like the very definition of creation, right? That you're creating something that's bigger than the parts of its whole. And I think there's so much beauty to that. And I would guess that it's why we make, right? And your children are going to have that memory of blueberry pancakes on Sunday. And whenever they have blueberry pancakes, it's going to elicit that beautiful feeling, that beautiful emotion, the same that your macaroni and cheese and your burger and chips do. And I think that there's just so much magic to that.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah. How do you identify as a maker today? What is it that you do that feels like your brand of creation?
This is a really challenging question for me in this specific point in time in my life. And I think that stems from a variety of factors. I chose to go to art school rather than taking a basketball scholarship. I chose to start a business with my husband, and that required different parts of me to come out. We chose to have children. That requires a different part of me to come out. I am an educator, which also takes this other part of my creativity. Every single one of these aspects of my life, I feel very strongly devoted to a certain level of creativity that goes into each one. And I don't view any of them as maybe just the title that they are. And so I would say, if I had to put a label on it at this point in time that sort of encompasses all of them, I view myself as an artist first, but I'm an artist who designs. And so as a maker, I think what that sort of translates to then is a creative approach to designing the outputs that I put out there to those around me. And I think it sort of does go back to my dad having a preference about eating meat with the meal every night. He has since gotten away from that as he has grown older in his age. But at that time, there were considerations of others. And that was something else that both of my parents instilled in us very young. And I think that very much had an impact on how I have become a creative. I think that also participating in team sports also impacted in the same way. So as a maker, I'm almost not considering it as something that is strictly my own. And instead, I view it as sort of this team effort where everyone does have input. My students in the classroom, I take the chemistry of them every semester because semester by semester, the same class absolutely should be taught differently. There's a similar element to that comes with the farm season. And we have Bear Creek Organic Farm. And as a designer, I approach the marketing materials, the photography, the voice of that brand somewhat differently every year. Brian and I talk about this a lot together because he also has a really great marketing mind as well and has a vision of what he thinks. And as a duo, that then becomes this joint project. It's not just, one of us versus the other. Although there are plenty of conversations where there are those things at odds as one could imagine, especially with someone who maybe went through formal training of it and someone who is a creative mind and has strong opinions that way. And so, yes, you can fill in the blanks with that. But I think that what it really comes down to as a maker for me is I take so seriously the impact of each of the decisions that goes into whatever that is that I'm creating, the object or the experience or the time-based reality of that even.
Right.
I think that that's also interesting too, from a standpoint of, I'm going to step back now and say, in art school, I chose animation as my major. So when I would tell people, oh, I'm majoring in animation, their immediate response would be, oh, so you're going to make cartoons. And to me, I'm thinking, I absolutely understand where that's coming from. But in reality, as an animator, I'm a time-based artist. I'm a time-based maker. And so I have to consider that fourth dimension in order to fully supply people with an experience, whether that is a two-dimensional experience that they can walk up to and interact with in some way, or something that they see on a screen, or something that they can physically come and experience as more of an installation. And I think that again is where, as a time-based artist by training, I think that I'm trying to use my understanding of storytelling, character development, even editing.
Yeah.
And I'm trying to consider it from the standpoint of, now when a customer comes to our on-farm market, what are they seeing first? And what is that timing and pacing of that experience? When they're coming to a workshop or a tour that Brian's giving, when we talk through, like, where should he start the tour? What are the things he should talk about? When should he talk about certain things? It's really trying to help him figure out the best way to disseminate the information that is in an educational tone, but also an experiential tone. And there are so many parts and pieces to this puzzle that aren't just the singular object that you see at the end.
Right.
I'm very much a process person. I love process. I absolutely love watching my students start in one spot, work through this challenge they've given themselves based on the prompt that I give them, of course, but they make it their own. And at the end, they're showing me something that I never knew I wanted. And I find a lot of beauty in that.
I had so many thoughts as you were speaking, and one of them is that in my own business, and I don't know if this is quite what you mean by being a time-based artist, but I think it is. So you can correct me if I'm wrong. But in my own business, I've created online courses that are static, right? I mean, they're dynamic in the fact that they are viewed with a group and there's a question and answer kind of a space, but they're already created, right? They're already recorded. And over the last few years, I've had this sense of, I guess, this dissatisfaction with that process, with it feeling like this static thing, like held in time, if you will, and not having, I have the ability in the live portions of the course, but not throughout the whole course, for it to have the flow and the flexibility to shift to that cohort of people, or to shift to who I am in that moment, right? Some of that stuff is 3 or 4 years old, and it feels kind of stale, to be quite honest. And it feels like it has already been done. It's finished. It's over. I love how when you talk to somebody, anyone, and they share their experience with you, and this is a side note, I'm going to give you lots of little bunny trails, and as they share their experience with you and you hear them, it like triggers your own thoughts and reminds you, I don't know if it gives you permission, but it's like, this is why I feel so sort of dissatisfied with what I have, because I want it to be in the moment. I want it to be present right now. And I love that you just shared that with us. And then I so appreciate the intention and the mindfulness that you put into that user experience, right? Into that community experience, let's call it. That seems a little more, and inviting. I try to do the same thing with what I do in the work that I do. And it's like, there's so many layers to it that nobody would even see the individual layers. There's so much to that intentionality and that synchronicity that you're trying to create. And I think that's gorgeous. And I think it's gorgeous to, especially from somebody who's classically artistically trained, to bring that to something like advertising for your organic farm.
Yes.
What a way to bring it all into your life. And like part of the point of my podcast is to look at how to bring vibrancy to our lives and intentionality and mindfulness and authenticity, if you will, to our lives through the lens of being a maker. Obviously, you can bring authenticity and vibrancy to your life without identifying as a creative or maker.
Absolutely.
But I like making and I like to talk to makers and I like to have those conversations. And I think that we inherently have this sense of, I can do that to us. And so I like to have this conversation through that lens. And I'm really grateful for what you shared. What a great conversation I'm having with Anne today. Oh, I can't wait to get back to it. But real quick, I want to share a word from our sponsor. Today's episode is sponsored by Ricky Oldenkamp Marketing. Here's what Ricky has to say. Your messaging can do the heavy lifting for you while you get to spend time actually doing what you love. Passionate, founder-led businesses hire Ricky for her razor-sharp research skills and gift for bold language. She crafts high-quality, fluff-free copy in your brand's authentic voice to drive conversions, increase profits, and help you achieve your business dreams so you can live your most outstanding life. For listeners of the podcast, Ricky has a sweeter than caramel macchiato offer. For anyone wanting to dip their toes into working with her, she's offering her strategy matchmaker sessions, normally $250, for only $97 for the first 20 people to take advantage of the offer. The session clarifies your brand's impact created from your current assets and the best fit strategy to expand your reach for your specific goals. You don't need to throw every strategy under the sun at your business to see what sticks. Instead, be intentional with your time and effort so your messaging and the right assets do the heavy lifting for you. After a deep dive one-on-one with Ricky to take stock of your current marketing, you'll receive a strategy report that outlines your action items to separate yourself from others with similar offers. Ready to drive conversions, increase profits, and achieve your business dreams to live your most outstanding life? Ricky's ready to help you get there. You can find Ricky at rickyoldenkamp.com. That's RICKIOLDENKAMP.com. To take advantage of her special strategy matchmaker session, go to the show notes for today's podcast, episode number 10. It's at kinshiphandwork.com/episode-10. And now back to our show. I have one question for you on that. The question I had is, there's definitely a school of thought around art where I think the sentence is something like, it's none of my business what anybody thinks about what I've created, right? And so it's something to that effect. And so I wonder how that relates to your journey as an artist. I can completely see and understand and relate to very much so creating an experience and being that problem solver that is so often part of being a maker as well. Of, okay, I have this feeling I want to evoke out into the community. How do I get to that end result from here? And of course, you have no control whether you get to that end result or not. So I guess kind of looking at it from that aspect, but also just the aspect of being a creative. And that, well, I guess that's the aspect I mean, being a creative and then letting it go.
I'll kind of go back to originally before I even went into all of that is I'm at a very interesting moment in my creativity. And I'm really only able to articulate it now at this moment in time, post the last few years, and really diving deep into why I'm doing what I'm doing and why I believe in what I'm doing. While I was in art school, graduating and trying to come up with, what do I do now? Because now I'm a trained creative with a specific set of skills. That is what I'm supposed to do. And maybe not even supposed to do. Maybe that's not the proper way to say it. I'm expected. There's a certain level of unspoken expectancy of what someone does when they are trained in a specific thing.
Yeah.
And what took me a lot of years to figure out, because I chose to go right out of undergrad and straight into grad school. And I was going specifically for the business side. I specifically chose the business side of the arts versus a master of fine arts where I could continue that craft and that making process. Because I told myself, I know that I will continue to make, but I don't know how to understand the business side.
Right.
I think that for me, that was that transitional point. But even then, I came out of grad school with this mask on during those 2 years saying, well, it's okay that I'm not really making. And yes, I had a couple of classes where I was creating these small animation bumpers for the PBS station that ran through Indiana University. And so I had that experience. My work was broadcast all over central to lower Indiana and beyond. I had that experience. But coming right out of grad school, if I wasn't an animator working in an animation studio, then I failed.
Right.
And I think that what that did to me mentally for the next couple of years with just the way my journey turned out and, the relationship I had at the time with Brian and a lot of other factors, obviously, you're kind of entering into this different level of adulthood at that point in time. And then everything just speeds up. You go through the next phases of life and then you start a business and now you're living somewhere where you're like, wow, I'm probably going to retire and live here the rest of my life, the rest of my days. And so to kind of be at this point now where I'm in the thick of it, of my career and thinking about like, wow, I'm like in my career now. And so to look at that and then think about the fact that, okay, I'm a creative. I was classically trained. I'm still not working as an animator. Have I still failed? And I think that that's where, and that was a very big question for me through the pandemic. And I think that what I came out of the other side with is how I just shared with you, this understanding of, no, I'm classically trained. So yes, I could make anybody in animation any day. I could characterize someone and put them into motion, set it to some music, and that's fun. And I can't wait to do that sort of thing with my kids and teach them how to do it and make them a character and, have this whole thing. That'll be fun. But the more powerful piece is, why was I so concerned with limiting myself to this one vision of what arbitrarily wasn't even being put on me? I was putting it on myself with assumptions of what I thought was expected of me. And I think that I'm now in a place where, as I just mentioned, I'm a time-based creative. I'm an artist who designs these experiences, education, branding, all of these things. And I think that then sort of getting at your question of artist and who cares who sees it, or who cares, I'm just making it to make. That's a very real question that also sort of ties into this in an interesting way. There are so many facets to being a creative that nobody understands unless they're in it. And I don't mean that to sound like people don't understand or, I'm not meaning it from that standpoint. I'm just saying that the difference between being an artist and a designer is the intention. Mm-hmm. When you're creating as an artist and when you're making as an artist, you are very much coming from a place of, I have something to say. I want to put this out there. I don't care if anybody sees it. This is about me trying to express something that I need to get out of myself now. And that is a different line of thinking. And that's a different purpose for that individual. And so, yeah, it doesn't matter what people think of it. Now, do those opinions and critiques and conversations affect the person who made it? And does that make them think differently about how they then make the next thing? Absolutely. How could it not? Right. But as a designer, your entire intention is to speak to that client base that you have. Right. And so for me to be a fine artist, or consider myself a fine artist first, who designs, I am choosing to express myself specifically for an audience. And that audience changes. I could relate this to beekeeping. And anytime I'm going into the hives, it's a performance piece. I have to take in the emotions that one hive is having one day and the emotions of a different hive a different day. Those queens are all living beings. They're having their own moment on any given day. And if
Right.
I am unwilling to consider their point of view on a given day, well, then I'm going to get stung, or I'm going to send them into a rage and they're going to come down to the farm and start looking for people to take it out on.
Right.
And those are customers, which can't happen. And so, there needs to be a lot more consideration for who people are and how they're coming to something that I'm choosing to create. Because in those moments of creation, it's no longer just about me. I am setting the stage and I am creating this environment that will be where people come to gather to have conversations, even without me there.
Right. As a business owner, I've thought a lot about marketing as well and creating an experience, right? And there's this balance, I believe, between, as a business owner, putting out your identity and then relating it to, and also including the identity of the clients or the customers or the community that you're hoping to reach, right? So I know that that can be a hard balance to find, that between not becoming a business that is identityless and sort of shifting to serve an audience. I believe there's a lot of value in having an identity, having a stand, if you will, but being flexible on that stand and understanding that you also have a client that you're trying to bring in. And so you have to, one, make sure that your ideas are vetted against the clients that you want to serve. And also two, having the flexibility to flow with what they might need and then vet that against what you need and see where that intersection is.
Absolutely. It's a real consideration. And when you're talking about branding and identity, that requires whoever it is that's exploring that for their own business to decide the direction they want to take it. And who it is that they are doesn't always equate to a specific person. And I think that that's kind of what you're getting at is, are you then creating an identity that is this avatar of sorts that other people can recognize? And larger companies and corporations will do that a lot of times and make it seem like there's this person, but we don't really know who it is. But then you have this owner that is the owner, that their identity is separate. And that's very intelligent to do it that way in specific circumstances. But I think that the way that Brian and I have chosen to go as far as the farm is concerned is, like we've said since day one, like we are the brand, like us as people.
Yes.
The brand isn't some other thing that we've decided or stated, the barn is the brand, like everything is centered on the barn. And I'm not saying that that's a bad decision. I'm saying that's not a decision we made.
Right.
And so when you can start to see how the decision that you made resonates with people, and then there's buy-in, that sort of puts fuel on the fire to be like, oh, wow, like, well, then how do we feel about this? Well, then what should we do about this over here? And now what should we do? And what do they want now? And so, but then you can start to have that conversation again with a lot more intentionality, and those decisions become easier. And I think anybody looking to start a business, starting with those questions of what you value are so critical. Mm-hmm. And an exercise that I do with my students in portfolio development, in the business of art, which are classes I teach at the college, one of the first questions that I ask them in both classes on day one is, so this concept of vocation that Frederick Buechner sort of started to ask, I've taken his question and tailored it more to what my students need as artists.
Right.
And so it goes something like this. What you are meant to do in your life is at the intersection of your deepest passion and what you believe to be the world's greatest need.
Yeah.
And if you can start there, like Frederick Buechner has so eloquently stated, then you can start to get at the root of what you should be working toward. Now, he goes in a different direction. I then take it and I add this concept of the 5 whys. And so really starting with not only what is it that is your deepest passion, what do you see as the world's greatest need? That's where you can start to see like, wow, I care about this thing. But then to match that with why,
Mhm.
and not just that surface level, it's that initial why that you start to say, oh, because I care about the environment, because I care about this, I care about that. But then it's like, well, why do you care about the environment? And then you give those answers and they're like, well, why do you care about that? So you ask that 5 times and you go in, and I give all the students this giant piece of paper, and I start so small in my example that I do in front of them. I put my name so small, and I can see the students kind of like glaring over, like, why is she doing it that small? Like, that's bad composition. And I'm just like, you just wait. And they all and it undoubtedly put their names huge, like in the middle or totally off to one side. And what they generate over the course of the next week is this giant thought bubble that just spans out and spreads out. And what they're doing is synthesizing everything that matters to them, but putting it into words and trying to challenge themselves to understand why in the world that matters. And from there, you can start to develop that more of like a mission or vision for yourself to say, well, here's why it matters to me. This is why. This is what I'm getting at. And now you can say, here is why other people should care. And if you can understand that, the rest of it will fall into place.
Right.
Because you're a maker. You can make anything, and you can decide to start making something that you've never made in your entire life. And you just want to get into something. My sister, she went to the same art school that I went to, majored in illustration, very talented, got really into collage, beautiful work. And for her senior thesis, decided, well, I really want to do fashion design. So she decided to take what she had been doing with paper for so long and turn it into clothes. And she had a fashion show, and she did this incredible work. And now she decided she wants to get into quilts and knitting. Yeah. And I've connected her with you, Tina. And I've tried to get her to connect with you because I feel like the two of you would really get along and it would be so fun. But she now has her own business, and she's really doing and trying, and she's putting herself out there and trying to find the way, because she was a classically trained artist. She's trying to figure out what that means for her, but she's finding it. And anytime I catch up with her and I hear what she's doing, I'm like, whoa, she's making massive strides. And she doesn't even see it because it's right in front of her.
Right. And I love this. I want to tell you a little story, and then I'm going to ask if you wouldn't mind, just for the listeners out there. I think this would be such a fun exercise if you would just lead them through briefly how to start out on that piece of paper. I know that some of them aren't going to identify as artists or people who want to make a business, but I think that this, gosh, it fits right into the idea of living a vibrant life, right? Because I talk a lot about when you know yourself really well, you have such a better chance at having a life you love. Because then you can curate what you bring into your life. You can curate what you put out in life. And I just think that it has so much value that way. So several years ago, I read a book called The Awakened Woman. I cannot remember the author's name, but I'll put it in the show notes. And one of the questions that has stuck with me, and it really very much relates to the question that you just asked, was she's talking about finding your purpose in life. And her question is what breaks your heart about the world? Like, what is the thing that breaks your heart about the world? And that's going to be different for all of us, right? Like for some people, that's going to be the loss of habitat for gorillas, or it's going to be, who knows, it's going to be something specific to each of us. And I think that there's so much value in knowing what that is, because then you can know where to put your energies. And so for me, when I answered that question for myself, it was women who felt alone. Women or children who felt alone and unseen and unheard. And so that's really what stemmed my desire to create a business teaching women how to sew clothing. It's not about clothing sewing, not at all. It's about them feeling that sense of empowerment that, like, look what I can do with my own two hands, and look how much I can love my body more now that I'm not limited by the sizes in the store and all of the other facets that bring that in. And then I talked to so many different podcasters and other business owners in my travels, and really we're all trying to do the same thing. My lens is through the lens of making, and my lens is through the lens of very specifically sewing clothing. But really, I want to empower people to feel strong and capable, and to know that they can be exactly who they need to be in the world. And so what broke my heart was the idea of women in particular because we all have a vein, and I'm not saying that men don't have the same issues, not at all, but like women who felt forgotten or unseen or silenced in some way. And so I think that relates directly to what you were just mentioning.
It absolutely does. And that's so beautiful. And I can feel that so much. It's so clear that it matters so much to you. And that is also a similar question I say to the students: what makes you so angry that you could cry? What is something that is so upsetting to you that you can't look away, even though it's awful? And it motivates you to like want to act and do something about. And because there's lots of different causes that all of us can be like, I will absolutely support that cause. But what's the one where it's like, I will lead that cause? Like that to me. So what you just offered with empowering women, and obviously, yes, men have their own thing. But for you, Tina, like for you, it happens to be women and children. And I think that even the fact that you know that is so powerful for you. And that helps to sort of guide you through this whole process.
It does. So then when you talk about that intersection between what I'm passionate about and what breaks my heart about, and what, because I've seen it as a trifecta in that way.
Absolutely. There's
what you're good at, what you're passionate about, and what is breaking your heart in the world, and that intersection in the center. Like that definitely is why I teach. I love teaching for probably the same reason that you do, right? That
probably
watching that growth and that shift in someone's mindset. So I wonder if you might share the exercise that you lead your students through, and so that the listeners can do that if they'd like to.
Absolutely. So what you do is you start with that question of the intersection. And so even just writing those things out, it's very important to put it into words that are on a piece of paper so that you can see them and reflect back on them. And in some ways, even writing out the definition of what those words are. We all know what the word happy means. We understand it. But until you look at the definition and you look at the antonyms even, and you see what it is and what it is not, that helps you to understand and fully say, yes, 1000%, this is accurate. At that point, just getting a piece of paper, it can be any size of paper. I recommend large though, because then you can sort of feel like you're not confined by the boundaries of the piece of paper. But writing your name in the middle and just putting a circle around it. And then anything that comes to your mind about what makes you you, or things that you love, things that you value. And it could be anything. It doesn't necessarily have anything to do with that intersection piece yet. You'll get back to it. Now, that said, obviously, there will be parts of that intersection that just naturally show up. And that's obvious because they're all tied together. You could have 5 different things spoken off of that central point, which is your name, or you could have 10 different things. At that point, you're going to look at those words and you're going to give yourself maybe 2 or 3 spokes that come off of each one of those. So this is growing exponentially. And you write in the first why. So for me, anytime I do this exercise, and I do repeat this exercise for myself, not like every month, but certainly like, every year, every couple of months, every 6 months or something of that nature, I definitely come back to it to sort of recenter myself. If I'm ever feeling like I need to recenter myself, this is a great exercise. And so for that matter, I always come back to art education. And I think that for me, that's where, when I look at my brain dump, that is that web that I've made of the 5 whys, I start to feel a little bit better about the fact that, like I didn't have to go be an animator in an animation studio to be successful, because that was only a piece of the puzzle. Like, yes, I care about time-based media and I care about what that does to people, but then why to that? So when you're filling out that first why, it'll still feel really good. And every single one of those initial points are going to seem very important. But then the next why is the second. And you do 2 or 3 spokes off of each of those spokes that you just had, or each of those bubbles, if you will. So then off of that why and those answers, you do the next, and you're at your 3rd, and then so on until you get to the 5th.
Right.
What's going to start to happen is very much there will be common themes. You'll come up with the same word. You'll be talking in a circle with yourself in some ways with some of these points that you're making to yourself, really. But there's going to be one of those that you're going to be able to continue to just challenge yourself to sort of work through and really dig in to the much meatier moment of why something actually does matter to you. And probably what's going to happen more often than not is when you get to that point, typically by the fourth or fifth why, you're going to look back at that intersection piece and you're going to say, wow, maybe it's not the same words, but those concepts and themes will be absolutely connected.
Yeah.
And if they're not, that doesn't mean you failed the exercise. It just means that there's more to it that you need to keep working through. And maybe that just comes from you coming back to it a few months later and saying, let's try this again. And again, like this exercise isn't about coming up with your mission or your exact brand. This is just a step in that multifaceted process. But that exercise can be so wonderful and refreshing and rejuvenating, and just, it can feel so good to break it down for yourself in such a way that you can visualize and being able to see where all these things that are seemingly important to you, maybe you put them all on the same level, but they're not. Right. And I think that that's also a really powerful realization to have. And that doesn't mean that different things won't take priority at different points in life. I think that's also kind of what you were talking about with yours, is these things are all ebbing and flowing all the time.
Right.
So what I tell my students is, this is just this moment in time that you're documenting. This is not by any stretch meaning that you're going to think the world's greatest need is the same thing throughout your entire life. Mm-hmm. That will change, And so I think that that's the beauty in it, is this document can be approached forever.
And this has been such a wonderful conversation. I could talk to you forever.
Same. I love it.
It's really good. So the question that I always end my podcast interview with is, and we may have really touched on this, but it might be different, so I'm going to ask it anyway, is what do you wish that people knew deep in their hearts that you think they might not know?
What a great question. This is, wow, I could take this in so many different directions. Are you referring to like about me, or you're saying just something that I believe that I want people to?
Well, I think that's kind of a loaded question of your own, because I think that often it's about us. But it's something, I think the things that we wish we knew are things that we also wish the world knew, right? Mm-hmm. About ourselves. Mm-hmm. And so I think it's one and the same in some ways. Mm-hmm. Whatever is popping out first, let that flow.
Something that I really want people to feel empowered by and to consider is the fact that every single person on earth is a creative. Mm-hmm. We all make in our own ways. I think that many times something that makes me sad is when creativity is squashed by a lot of times circumstances that can't be helped, or one person or individual in someone's life who maybe unintentionally or intentionally makes someone feel like what they've created, oftentimes children, doesn't look good or it doesn't sound good. And it can really put an unfortunate damper on that creative process that's so necessary, especially as young children, to have as they're growing up, and that they can use as they're growing up as a form of expression. And I think that taking away this idea of creativity, or taking away the desire or the excitement around wanting to create, I think that for me, I just want to remind everybody that we were all children once. Mm-hmm. We all had an imagination at one point in time. Whether you chose to harness that and carry it through into adulthood, or whether you chose to hide that from the world for any number of reasons, my hope is that everybody can find it again one day and allow that to shine through, because that is definitely where I'm getting so emotional. Sorry. I think that aside from being emotional about it, I think it's the greatest gift that everybody has is their creative power. And to take that away from someone is probably one of the most unspeakable things that happen. And I just really hope that everyone understands that you do have creative power, you do have a voice, and you do have the ability to express that, and that it matters to the world. And you matter to the world. And whatever that voice looks like, you should be proud and allow it to shine, because you don't know how many other people will resonate with the voice that you have to offer. I think it's important for all of us to remember that creativity isn't just about the end product. It's about connection, and we all want to be connected.
And that was so powerful. I want to thank you for being vulnerable with us and for sharing.
Yeah.
And I think that just what a beautiful gift. Thank you.
Yeah. Thank you.
I know people are going to want to connect with what you're doing because you're a light in this world.
Thank you. Thank you so much.
Will you share how they can find you, where they can find
Absolutely.
you, and how they can connect with you?
Absolutely. You can connect with me via Bear Creek Organic Farm. I also have a personal email. It's a little confusing, so maybe Tina can include it in the notes. But it is AN as in Nancy, so AN essentially, AN Morningstar, all lowercase, @gmail.com. And I love to hear from people. I love to connect with people. And I'm always happy to talk with people about creativity and art and design and all that entails.
Oh, can I just say too that I have always loved your name.
Oh, thank you.
And Morningstar.
It's real. It is real. I know. I know.
So magical.
Thank you. Thank you. It's actually when my dad's side of the family came over on Ellis Island, actually, it translated from German Morgenstern directly into Morningstar. One of my dad's sisters actually found a photo. They actually have a photo of that page, and so they can see where whoever wrote Morgenstern Morningstar. And that's how it started.
And that's our show for today. I want to thank Anne Morningstar for being my guest today. Cannot wait to hear what you thought of our conversation. Hey, and if you do the exercise that she mentioned, tell me how that goes. I'm going to do it too, and I will be sure to share with you. Thanks for listening. I appreciate you being here. You can find all the links to the things that we talked about in the show notes at kinshiphandwork.com. Click on podcast and you'll see this as episode number 10. I love it that I get to share these amazing stories with you. And every week I'm like, this was my favorite podcast yet. And then the next week, it's the same. Oh, and I just wish almost that they had more time to be live because I still want to bask in the glory of the previous conversation. But alas, time marches on. And so, would you do me a favor? Will you jump on your favorite podcast listening app and subscribe to the show? And while you're there, will you rate the show for me? I want to reach new people. The best way for me to reach new people is through ratings and subscriptions. And friends, have the most lovely day. And a final word from this episode's sponsor. I want to thank Ricky Oldenkamp Marketing for sponsoring today's podcast. If you didn't catch it earlier, she has a special deal just for listeners to this show. She's offering a strategy matchmaking session, which is normally $250 for only $97 for the first 20 people to take advantage of the offer. You get a deep dive one-on-one with Ricky to take stock of your current marketing. And after that, you'll receive a strategy report that outlines your action items to separate yourself from others with similar offers. You'll understand your best fit marketing strategy and how to position your offer so your messaging delivers what you offer and why you are the perfect person to deliver it. No more imposter syndrome, no worries about what you should do, and no pressure to do everything and be everywhere. Ricky helps you set up a sustainable marketing plan that feels good to implement so you can market with ease and confidence. You can find out more about that complete offer on the show notes. Go to kinshiphandwork.com/episode-10.